Welcome to Calm, Dreamy Sleep, a peaceful place where stories become dreams. Just relax and slowly close your eyes. Take a gentle breath in and let the day quietly drift away. If this story brings you peace, if you feel calmer, lighter, please subscribe and like. So let's start. There lived a king and queen who had everything the world could offer. Everything, except one thing: a child. For many years they had wished and hoped and prayed. And at last, their wish was granted. A daughter was born to them, a tiny princess with eyes like the morning sky and a smile that made the whole court weep with joy. The king, overcome with happiness, decided to celebrate with a christening feast. Such a feast as had never been seen before. He invited all the fairies in the land to be godmothers to his daughter. There were 6 of them, kind and powerful beings who could bestow gifts upon the child that would last a lifetime. After the ceremony, the feast began. For each fairy, a place was set at the table. A magnificent covered dish, an embroidered napkin, and a knife and fork of pure gold, studded with diamonds and rubies. But as they took their seats, a commotion arose at the door. An old fairy entered, one who had not been seen in the kingdom for 50 years. She had been away, traveling in distant lands, and no one had thought to invite her. The king, troubled and embarrassed, ordered a place to be set for her at once. But there was no golden dish left. All 7 had been made for the 6 fairies and the princess herself. The only dish remaining was of common delf, simple pottery. The old fairy said nothing, but her eyes grew dark, and she muttered words under her breath, words that boded no good. One of the younger fairies, sitting nearby, heard those muttered words, and her heart grew cold with fear. Quietly, she rose from her seat and slipped behind the tapestry that hung on the wall. She would let the others speak first, and if any ill gift were bestowed, she would do what she could to soften it. One by one, the 6 fairies offered their blessings. The princess would grow to be the fairest woman in all the world. She would have a temper sweet as an angel. She would be graceful as a willow in the wind. She would sing like a nightingale. She would dance like a leaf upon a stream. She would possess every grace and accomplishment that any princess could desire. Then the old fairy stepped forward. She did not smile. She did not offer blessings. She shook her head slowly, spitefully, and spoke words that fell like stones into still water. "When the princess grows up," she said, "when she learns to spin, she will prick her finger with the spindle, and from that wound, she will die." A gasp ran through the hall. The queen clutched her husband's arm. The guests wept and wrung their hands. The king's face grew pale as death. But then, from behind the tapestry, the young fairy appeared. Her eyes were kind. Her voice was calm. "Your Majesties," she said gently, "do not despair. I cannot undo what my sister has done, but I can change it." She looked at the tiny princess, sleeping in her cradle, so peaceful, so unaware. "The princess will indeed prick her finger, but she will not die. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep, a sleep that will last for 100 years. The king and queen listened, their hearts aching, but grateful for any hope. "At the end of that time," the fairy continued, "a prince will come. He will find her, and he will awaken her with love. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the fairies vanished. The hall grew quiet, and the king and queen were left alone with their precious child and their terrible knowledge. The king acted at once. He issued a decree throughout the land. No one, under pain of death, was to spin. No spinning wheels were to be kept in any house. The very word spindle was not to be spoken. Years passed. The princess grew. She was everything the fairies had promised: beautiful, graceful, sweet of temper, kind of heart. Her parents watched her with love and fear, hoping that the prophecy had somehow been forgotten, that the old fairy's curse had faded with time. But on the day the princess turned 15, the king and queen had to leave her for a few hours. They were needed in another part of the kingdom, and the princess, curious and adventurous, began to explore. She wandered through the great palace, through halls she had seen 100 times. But then she found something new, a winding staircase she had never noticed before. It led upward, up into one of the old towers. She climbed, step by step, her hand trailing along the cold stone wall, until she reached the top. And there, in a small room, sat an old woman, so old, so deaf, that she had never heard the king's decree. Before her stood a spinning wheel, and in her hand, a spindle. The princess had never seen such a thing. "What are you doing, good woman?" she asked. "I am spinning, my dear," the old woman said. "Would you like to try?" The princess took the spindle in her hand. It was light. It was strange. She turned it this way and that, curious, clumsy, and the point pricked her finger. A tiny drop of blood appeared. So small, so insignificant. But the princess's eyes grew heavy. Her limbs grew weak, and she sank gently to the floor, fast asleep. The old woman cried out in fear. Ladies in waiting came running. They tried everything to wake their young mistress, but she would not wake. She lay there, beautiful as an angel, her chest rising and falling with soft breath, her lips curved in a gentle smile, her eyes closed as if in peaceful dream. When the king and queen returned and saw their daughter, they knew. The prophecy had come true, but they also remembered the young fairy's promise. Their daughter was not dead. She only slept, and would sleep for 100 years. They carried her to the most beautiful room in the palace. They laid her on a bed of silk and gold. They kissed her forehead. They wept. And then they left. But they were not the only ones who remembered. The young fairy, far away in her own kingdom, felt a tremor in the air. She knew what had happened, and she came at once. In a chariot of fire drawn by dragons, she arrived at the palace. The king was startled by the sight, but he went to the door and offered her his hand. The fairy looked around the silent palace. She saw the sleeping princess. She saw the sorrow in her parents' eyes, and she nodded slowly. "This is as it must be," she said gently. "But I will do what I can to help." She raised her wand, and with a wave, she touched everyone in the palace. The ladies in waiting, the gentlemen ushers, the cooks and kitchen maids, the pages and footmen, the horses in the stables, the grooms who tended them. Even the little dog, Puffy, who had curled up beside his mistress on her bed. One by one, they all fell asleep. Where they stood, where they sat, where they lay. The fire in the kitchen went out. The spits stopped turning. The palace grew silent as the grave. The king and queen, after one last look at their daughter, departed. And the fairy waved her wand one final time. From the earth, great trees began to grow, thick and fast, thorny brambles, twisting vines. They rose up around the palace, higher and higher, until the entire castle was hidden from view. Only the very top of the tallest tower could be seen, rising above the impenetrable wood, and there the princess slept, waiting. 100 years passed. Kingdoms rose and fell. Wars were fought and forgotten. The old king died, and his throne passed to another family. The story of the sleeping princess faded from memory, became a legend. Then a rumor. Then nothing at all. But one day, a young prince came hunting in the forest. He was brave and handsome, with a kind heart and a curious mind. His horse stopped at the edge of a great wood, so thick and thorny that no one could enter. "What place is this?" the prince asked his companions. No one knew. They rode along the edge of the wood, searching for a way in, finding none. At last, they met an old peasant, a very old man, with white hair and kind eyes. He remembered something. A story his grandfather had told him when he was a child. "In that tower," the old man said, pointing, "there sleeps a princess, the most beautiful princess in all the world. She has slept there for 100 years, waiting for a prince to wake her." The prince's heart stirred. He looked at the impenetrable wood, and he made a decision. "I will go," he said. His companions tried to stop him. They called him foolish. They called him reckless. But the prince would not be dissuaded. He dismounted from his horse, and he walked toward the wood. To his amazement, the branches bent aside. The thorns sheathed themselves. The brambles sank into the earth. A path opened before him, and behind him, it closed again. He was alone, but he was not afraid. He walked through the silent wood. The trees were ancient. The air was still. And then he saw the palace. It rose before him, gray and beautiful, wrapped in silence. He entered the courtyard. Rows of guards stood at attention, but they did not move. Their faces were flushed with sleep, their eyes closed. He passed through great halls, ladies and gentlemen, frozen in mid-gesture. Pages slumped in corners. Maids bent over their work, asleep. Not a sound, not a movement. Only the soft dust of 100 years lying gently on everything. The prince climbed the stairs, higher and higher, until he reached the tower room. And there, on a bed of silk and gold, he saw her. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Her dark hair spread across the pillow. Her lips were parted slightly, as if smiling in her sleep. Her chest rose and fell with the gentlest breath. She looked not as if she had slept for 100 years, but as if she had only just closed her eyes. The prince knelt beside her. He gazed at her for a long time. His heart was full. And then, very gently, he leaned forward. Some say he kissed her, but no one saw, and she never told. But in that moment, her eyes opened. They were the color of the morning sky, and they looked at him with love. "Is it you, my prince?" she whispered. "I have waited so long." He took her hand. He could not speak. His heart was too full, but his eyes told her everything. They sat together for a long time, talking. She told him of her dreams, the dreams of 100 years. He told her of his world, the world outside the wood. And they found in each other everything they had ever wanted. Meanwhile, the rest of the palace woke. The guards stretched and yawned. The ladies smoothed their dresses. The cooks hurried to the kitchen. The fire blazed up as if it had never gone out. The spits began to turn. And everyone was terribly hungry. A lady of honor came to the tower room. "Dinner is served, Your Highness," she said. And the prince led his princess down to the great hall. That evening, they were married. The musicians played, the guests feasted, and the princess, though she was 100 years older than her bridegroom, looked no older than he. For magic had preserved her, and love had found her at last. After a few days, they left the palace together. Behind them, the enchanted wood vanished. The towers crumbled into mist, and the palace of the sleeping princess was seen no more. They returned to the prince's kingdom. No one asked too many questions about the princess, for a prince may marry whom he chooses. And she was so beautiful, so kind, so gracious, that everyone loved her. They lived a long and happy life together. The prince died first, as mortals do, and the princess, when her time came, lay down peacefully, content, loved, and grateful for the 100 years of dreams and the one perfect lifetime that followed. Let yourself drift now. Drift like the princess drifting through 100 years of peaceful dreams. Drift like the prince walking through an enchanted wood. Drift like love itself, gentle and patient, waiting for the right moment to awaken. There is nothing you need to do tonight. Nothing you need to solve. Nothing you need to carry. Just rest. Just breathe. Just be. Feel the soft support beneath you, holding you, keeping you safe. Hear the sound of my voice, like a friend sitting beside you in the darkness, watching over you, caring for you, guiding you gently toward dreams. The night is soft. If you would like to return to this quiet little corner of cozy fairy tales, you are always welcome here. Always. And if these stories bring you comfort, if they help you find your way to sleep, you may softly like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss our peaceful night's tale. There once was a gentleman, a kind and honest man, who lived with his young daughter in a comfortable house at the edge of a great forest. His wife had passed away when the girl was very small, and he had raised her alone, with love and patience through all the years. She was a gentle child, with her mother's kind eyes and her mother's warm heart, and she brought sunshine into every room she entered. But the gentleman grew lonely as the years passed, and at last he remarried. His new wife was a widow, a woman of proud bearing and sharp tongue, who had 2 daughters of her own. From the very first day, the stepmother made it clear that she did not care for her husband's daughter. The girl was too kind, too gentle, too good, and her very presence seemed to irritate the woman. She gave the girl all the hardest work to do: scrubbing floors, cleaning grates, dusting every room from top to bottom, washing dishes until her hands were red and raw. And when the work was done, the girl had no place to rest. Her stepsisters had beautiful chambers with soft beds and velvet curtains, with mirrors that reached from floor to ceiling, with warm fires that burned all night. But the girl was sent to sleep in the attic, on a thin mattress stuffed with straw, with only one wooden chair and a broken window that let in the cold night air. She never complained. She never spoke a word against her stepmother or stepsisters. She knew her father loved her, but she also knew he was ruled by his new wife, and she did not wish to trouble him. When her work was finished each evening, she would sit in the chimney corner, close to the warmth of the dying fire, among the soft gray ashes that gathered there. And because of this, her stepsisters gave her a name, a cruel name. They called her Ash Girl. But even in her ragged clothes, even with ash smudged on her cheeks, she was more beautiful than they could ever be. And they hated her for it. Now it happened that the king's son, the prince of that land, was to give a series of balls. He was of age to marry, and his father and mother hoped he would find a bride among the noble ladies of the kingdom. Invitations were sent to every fine family in the land, and among them, to the stepmother and her 2 daughters. Oh, how excited they were. They talked of nothing but the ball for days and days. What they would wear, how they would do their hair, which jewels would best suit their complexions. The elder sister said she would wear her velvet gown, deep crimson with trimmings of fine lace. The younger sister said she would wear her silk petticoat with an overskirt of flowered brocade and her diamond tiara, which was finer than anything her sister owned. This led to arguments, and the arguments led to shouting, and the shouting led to tears. And through it all, Ash Girl listened quietly from the chimney corner, saying nothing. At last, the sisters called to her. They knew she had good taste, though she never had anything fine to wear. They knew she could arrange hair better than anyone in the city, and so they commanded her to help them prepare. Ash Girl came willingly. She brushed their long hair until it shone. She arranged their curls in the latest fashion. She helped them into their gowns, fastening tiny buttons and adjusting falling ruffles. She did it all with gentle hands and a kind heart, never once showing any bitterness. As she worked on the elder sister's hair, the girl spoke sharply. "Ash Girl, do you not wish you were going to the ball?" Ash Girl's hands paused for just a moment. Then she continued her work. "Madam," she said softly, for they made her call them Madam, "you are only mocking me. It is not my fortune to have such pleasures." The elder sister laughed. "You are right. People would only laugh to see a little Ash Girl at a ball." Any other girl might have pulled the hair or tangled the curls, but Ash Girl was good. She finished the hair perfectly, smooth and elegant, as pretty as could be. At last, the sisters were ready. They had scarcely eaten for 2 days, trying to make themselves slender. They had broken half a dozen laces, pulling them tight around their waists. But now they were beautiful, or so they believed. Ash Girl followed them to the door, watched as they climbed into the waiting carriage, watched as it rolled away down the lane. And when the last sound of wheels had faded into the evening, she went back to the kitchen, sat down in the chimney corner, and cried. The fire crackled softly. The ashes stirred in the hearth, and suddenly, there was someone beside her. A woman. Small and kind-faced, with eyes that sparkled like stars. Ash Girl had never seen her before, but something about her felt familiar, felt safe, felt like home. "What are you crying for, my dear?" the woman asked gently. Ash Girl tried to speak, but her sobs stopped her. She could only whisper, I wish. The woman smiled. "You wish to go to the ball, isn't that so?" Ash Girl nodded. "Then be a good girl," said the woman, "and you shall go." She reached out and touched Ash Girl's cheek, and her touch was warm, like sunlight through a window. "First," she said, "run into the garden and fetch me the largest pumpkin you can find." Ash Girl did not understand. What could a pumpkin have to do with going to a ball? But she was obedient and kind, and she did as she was asked. She brought the largest pumpkin from the garden, round and golden, heavy in her arms. The woman took it, scooped out the inside until it was hollow, and then touched it with a small wand that seemed to appear from nowhere. In an instant, the pumpkin transformed. It became a magnificent carriage, gilded and gleaming, lined with rose-colored satin, with windows of crystal and doors of polished wood. Ash Girl stared, her eyes wide with wonder. "Now," said the woman, "fetch me the mousetrap from the pantry." Ash Girl brought it. Inside were 6 fat mice, soft and gray, nibbling at the cheese. The woman lifted the wire door, and as each mouse ran out, she touched it with her wand. One by one, they became beautiful horses, dappled gray, with flowing manes and tails, stamping their hooves gently, ready to run. "But what shall we do for a coachman?" asked the woman. Ash Girl thought for a moment. "There is a large rat in the rat trap," she said. "Perhaps he might do?" The woman smiled. "Fetch him," The rat was brought, and with a touch of the wand, he became a fine coachman with the most magnificent whiskers imaginable, wearing a smart coat and a tall hat. Then the woman took 6 lizards from behind the pumpkin frame and touched them each in turn. They became 6 footmen in splendid livery, all in gold and blue, who immediately jumped up behind the carriage as if they had been footmen all their lives. "Well, Ash girl," said the woman, "now you can go to the ball." Ash girl looked down at herself, at her ragged dress, at her bare feet, at her hands still gray with ash. "What in these clothes?" she whispered. The woman laughed softly, a warm sound, like bells in the distance. She touched Ash Girl with her wand. And in that moment, everything changed. The threadbare jacket became cloth of gold, stiff with embroidery, sparkling with jewels. The woolen petticoat lengthened into a gown of sweeping satin, the color of moonlight that shimmered with every movement. And her little feet, no longer bare, were covered in silk stockings and the prettiest slippers imaginable. Slippers made of glass, clear as water, sparkling like diamonds. Ash Girl could not speak. She could only stare at herself in wonder. "Now," said the woman gently, "you may go, but you must remember one thing." Ash Girl looked at her. "If you stay 1 moment past midnight, your carriage will become a pumpkin again. Your horses will become mice. Your coachman will become a rat. Your footmen will become lizards. And you will become the little Ash Girl you were an hour ago." Ash Girl nodded. She understood. She would not forget. She climbed into the carriage, and the footman closed the door behind her. The coachman flicked the reins, and the horses began to move, pulling her smoothly down the lane, toward the palace, toward the ball. The palace was ablaze with light. Music drifted through the open windows. Ladies and gentlemen in their finest clothes filled the grand halls. And at the entrance, waiting as if he knew someone special would arrive, stood the prince. When the golden carriage pulled up, when the footman opened the door, when Ash Girl stepped out in her gown of moonlight, the prince caught his breath. He had never seen anyone so beautiful. He offered her his hand and led her into the ballroom. The crowd parted before them. Whispers followed in their wake. "Who is she? Have you ever seen such beauty? Where does she come from?" But no one knew. No one could say. The prince danced with her all evening. She moved like water, like wind, like moonlight on the sea. He could not take his eyes from her. Even the old king remarked to the queen that he had not seen such grace and beauty since Her Majesty's own youth. And Ash Girl, poor Ash Girl, who had never been to a ball, who had never worn a fine dress, who had never been admired by anyone, felt as if she were dreaming. A beautiful dream. one she hoped would never end. She saw her stepsisters across the room. They did not recognize her. How could they? She was so changed. She went to them, sat beside them, spoke to them kindly. She offered them fruits from the refreshment table. She complimented their dresses. They were flattered beyond words that this beautiful princess, for surely she must be a princess, would pay them such attention. They had no idea who she really was. The evening flew by. The music played. The candles burned low. And Ash Girl was so happy, so completely happy, that she forgot to watch the clock. Then, suddenly, she heard it. The first chime of midnight. She rose from her seat, murmured an apology to the prince, and fled. Down the grand staircase, through the glittering halls, past the astonished guests. The prince ran after her, but he could not catch her. As she reached the palace doors, the clock struck the last stroke of 12. And in that instant, her gown vanished. Her carriage became a pumpkin. Her horses became mice. Her coachman became a rat. Her footmen became lizards. And Ash Girl, beautiful Ash Girl, became once more the little cinder wench in ragged clothes. She ran home through the dark streets, breathless and cold, with nothing left of her magical evening but one thing. One small glass slipper. The other she had dropped on the palace steps as she fled. When her stepsisters returned home, they could talk of nothing but the ball and the mysterious princess who had appeared, and how she had fled at midnight, and how the prince had found her glass slipper and would not let it go. He looked at it constantly, they said, turned it over and over in his hands. They said he was clearly in love with the lady who had worn it. Ash Girl listened from the chimney corner. Her face was turned toward the fire, and perhaps that was why her cheeks were so pink. But no one noticed. No one ever noticed her. A few days later, a herald came through the city. He carried a small glass slipper on a velvet cushion, and he announced, with trumpets and proclamations, that the prince would marry the lady whose foot fit the slipper. The lady who could produce its match. Every lady in the kingdom tried. Princesses and duchesses, countesses and simple gentlewomen. But the slipper fitted no one. It was a fairy slipper, and it would only fit the one it belonged to. At last, the herald came to the house of the two sisters. They tried with all their might to force their feet into the delicate glass shoe. But it was no use. Their feet were too large, too clumsy, too wide. "Let me try," said a soft voice from the chimney corner. The sisters burst out laughing. "You? A little Ash Girl like you?
Don't be ridiculous."
But the herald had his orders. Every maiden in the city must try. No exceptions. So Ash Girl came forward. She sat down on the three-legged stool. She held out her little foot, and the herald slipped the glass slipper onto it. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then Ash Girl reached into her pocket and brought out the other slipper. She put it on her other foot, and as she stood up, the magic returned. Her ragged clothes became the gown of moonlight. Her ash-smudged face became beautiful, and her stepsisters recognized her at last. They fell to their knees. They begged her forgiveness. They were terrified of what she might do. But Ash Girl, gentle Ash Girl, raised them up and embraced them. "I forgive you," she said softly, "with all my heart." Then she went with the herald to the palace. The prince was waiting. When he saw her, his face lit up like the sun. He knew her at once. His beautiful princess, the lady of the ball, the owner of the little glass slipper. She told him her whole story, about her stepmother, about her stepsisters, about the hard work and the attic room, about the fairy godmother who had made it all possible. The prince listened to every word, and he loved her all the more. They were married on a beautiful spring day. The stepsisters came to the wedding. They were no longer cruel. Ash Girl's kindness had changed them, and they lived, all of them, in peace and happiness ever after. Let yourself drift now. Drift like Ash Girl drifting through her magical evening. Drift like the music drifting through the palace windows. Drift like dreams coming softly to carry you away. There is nothing you need to do tonight. Nothing you need to solve. Nothing you need to carry. Just rest. Just breathe. Just be. Feel the soft support beneath you, holding you, keeping you safe. Hear the sound of my voice, like a friend sitting beside you in the darkness, watching over you, caring for you, guiding you gently toward dreams. The night is soft. The night is kind. The night is holding you in its gentle arms. Sleep is waiting, waiting with open arms, waiting to welcome you home. Let yourself go now. Let yourself fall gently, like a leaf falling from a tree in autumn, like a snowflake drifting down in the quiet hours before dawn, like a whisper becoming silence. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. Sleep sweetly. Good night, dear one. Good night.